Everything we are is basically a product of learning. Seriously. From the way a dog automatically drools when it hears a treat bag, to how we pick up new trends on social media, our brains are constantly being rewired by our experiences. Today, we're going to break down the three main ways that happens: by making connections, by facing consequences, and just by watching other people. Ever wonder why that one song instantly puts you in a good mood? Or why a certain smell, like cookies baking, can transport you right back to your childhood? It might feel like magic, but it's not. It's a process called learning, where your brain has built these powerful, invisible links between a trigger and a feeling. So, what are we actually talking about when we say learning? Well, the textbook definition is any pretty long-lasting change in behavior or knowledge that happens because of an experience. And this isn't just about school stuff. It's the reason you can ride a bike without thinking, and it's also the reason your heart might start pounding before you have to give a speech. So here's our game plan. We're going to start with Pavlov and his famous drooling dogs. Then we'll get into the pretty controversial story of little Albert. After that, we'll unpack Skinner's incredible ideas about rewards and punishments. And finally, we'll look at how much we learn just by watching. All right, so our journey begins with a Russian physiologist named Ivan Pavlov. And the funny thing is, he wasn't even trying to figure out learning. Nope, he was studying digestion. He was literally just interested in dog drool. But, as it turns out, some of the best discoveries in science happen completely by accident. And what he started to notice was, well, it was kind of weird. The dogs would start salivating before they even saw the food. They'd drool when they saw the lab assistant who fed them, or even just at the sound of his footsteps coming down the hall. Pavlov realized that this automatic reflex, drooling, was being triggered by things simply associated with the food. A new connection was being formed in their brains. So this led to his brilliant, famous experiment. Okay, so check this out. Step 1. A bell is just a bell. It means nothing to the dog. Food, on the other hand, automatically makes the dog drool. Simple enough. Step 2, he started pairing the two. He'd ring the bell and then immediately present the food, over and over again. And then, for step 3, he tried ringing the bell without any food. And what happened? The dog drooled. That neutral sound had now taken on the power of the food itself.
Okay, there's some jargon here, but it's actually super simple once you break it down. The food is the unconditioned stimulus. The dog doesn't need to learn to like it. The drooling is the unconditioned response. The bell starts out as neutral, but after being paired with the food, it becomes the conditioned stimulus. And that creates a brand new learned behavior, the conditioned response of drooling just to the sound of the bell. That's the basic recipe for what we call classical conditioning.
But here's the thing. This connection isn't set in stone. That first phase, where the dog learns the bell-food connection, is called acquisition. Now, if you keep ringing that bell but never bring any food, eventually the dog stops drooling. That's called extinction. But, and this is the wild part, if you let the dog rest for a while and then ring the bell again out of the blue, the drooling might just pop right back. That's called spontaneous recovery. The connection gets weaker, but it seems like it's never completely gone. All right, so if Pavlov opened the door, our next guy, John B. Watson, pretty much kicked it down. He looked at Pavlov's work with dogs and asked this huge question. If you can condition an automatic reflex, could you condition a human emotion? And this led to one of the most infamous and ethically questionable experiments in the history of psychology. This is the story of little Albert. He was just a baby. And at the start, he was totally fine with animals, even a little white rat, no fear at all. But then, Watson set up his experiment. Every single time little Albert reached out to touch the rat, Watson would sneak up behind him and slam a steel bar with a hammer, making this awful, terrifying noise. It only took a few repetitions. Pretty soon, just the sight of the white rat was enough to make little Albert break down in tears. Watson had successfully conditioned fear. And it didn't just stop with the rat. Albert's fear started to spread, like a ripple in a pond. This is called stimulus generalization. He became terrified of a rabbit, a dog, even a Santa Claus mask with a white beard. Basically, anything white and furry became a trigger. But, and this is key, he wasn't afraid of things that were different, like a set of wooden blocks. That shows us stimulus discrimination. His brain could generalize the fear, but it could still tell the difference. Okay, so everything up to now has been about these automatic, involuntary reactions. But what about all the choices we actually make every day? Well, that brings us to B.F. Skinner. He had a radical idea that our voluntary behaviors aren't random at all. He argued that they're controlled entirely by their consequences. He called it operant conditioning. The core idea here is really simple. If you do something and something good happens as a result, you're much more likely to do it again. If you do something and something bad happens, you're probably not going to do that again. We are all constantly learning through trial and error, and our behavior is being shaped by what happens next. Now, Skinner pointed out that there are basically two flavors of rewards, or reinforcers. First, you have primary reinforcers. These are the things we're biologically wired to need: food, water, warmth, safety. But honestly, most of what drives our day-to-day life are secondary reinforcers. Things like money, getting praise from your boss, or seeing good grades on a test. We weren't born wanting these things. We learned that they're valuable. Now, this next part is super important, and it's where a lot of people get tripped up. Both positive and negative reinforcement are used to increase a behavior. They just do it in different ways. Positive reinforcement is about adding something good. You give a dog a treat when it sits. Easy. Negative reinforcement is about removing something bad. Think about your alarm clock. That sound is horrible, right? So you hit the snooze button or get out of bed to make it stop. Your behavior, getting up, is reinforced because it removes the annoying noise. So how do you use this to teach something really complex? Like, say, training a pigeon to play ping pong. You do it through a process called shaping. You don't just wait for the pigeon to hit the ball. First, you reward it for just looking at the paddle, then only for touching the paddle, then only for pushing it. You reward these little baby steps, what he called successive approximations, until you've built up the entire complex behavior, one little piece at a time. But as powerful as these ideas were, Pavlov and Skinner missed something huge. It's like they were only looking at one piece of a giant puzzle. A psychologist named Bandura came along and argued that we don't always need direct experience to learn. We're social creatures, and a massive amount of what we know comes from just watching other people. And this simple idea, right here, is the absolute core of his social learning theory. It might sound kind of obvious to us today, but at the time, it was a game changer. It meant that learning wasn't just about an animal reacting to a bell or a reward. It was also about observation, imitation, and our social world. The fancy term for this is observational learning, but all it really means is that our behavior can change after we watch someone else, a model, do something. And that model can be anyone, a parent, a teacher, a celebrity, or even a character in a video game. And think about it. You do this all the time. Every time you watch a TikTok to learn a new dance, or pull up a YouTube tutorial to figure out how to assemble furniture, or follow a cooking show step by step, that's observational learning in action. You didn't have to figure it out through trial and error. You just watched a model and copied them. All right, so we've got these three huge ideas floating around: Pavlov's associations, Skinner's consequences, and Bandura's observations. How do they actually fit together in the real world? Well, the truth is, they're all happening, all the time, often all at once. So let's just recap the big three, right? First, we learn by association, where our brains automatically link two things together, like a specific song and a great memory. Second, we learn by consequences, where we're more likely to repeat actions that get us good results. And third, we learn by observation, which is as simple as watching someone else do something and then trying it ourselves. And that leaves us with a really big, kind of personal question to chew on. If so much of who we are, our habits, good and bad, our fears, our preferences, is just the result of these learning processes, what does that really mean for us? Well, it means that what has been learned can also be unlearned, and that new things can always be learned to take their place. So the real question is, what do you want to start with?